The cold wind swept through the bustling city streets as pedestrians hurried past, wrapped in thick coats and scarves. Among them was a young girl, no older than 10, wearing a faded sweater that was too thin for the biting air. Her small hands were red from the cold, but she didn't seem to mind. She stood near the entrance of a luxurious jewelry store, her wide eyes fixed on the glittering display inside. Inside the store, a tall, distinguished man in an expensive suit examined a collection of rings presented to him by an eager salesman. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, his posture commanding respect. He was none other than William Harrington, a billionaire CEO known for his ruthless business tactics and an empire built on determination. The girl hesitated before stepping forward. The warmth inside the store was almost overwhelming compared to the icy streets. Her worn-out sneakers left faint prints on the polished marble floor as she approached the man. The security guard glanced at her, but seeing her small frame, chose to ignore her. "Sir," her voice was soft but clear, "my mother has a ring just like yours." A moment of silence hung in the air. The salesman stopped mid-sentence, his expression shifting to confusion. Customers nearby turned their heads, curious about the interruption. William Harrington, who had been about to make his purchase, slowly turned his gaze to the child. His sharp blue eyes, accustomed to boardrooms and negotiations, studied her carefully. There was no malice in the girl's expression, only sincerity. She pointed to the elegant gold ring on his right hand, a family heirloom that had belonged to his late mother. It was one of the few things he cherished outside of his wealth. His grip on the ring tightened as something unspoken passed through his mind. His voice, usually firm and authoritative, softened ever so slightly. "What did you say?" The girl, unaware of the weight of her words, repeated herself. "My mother has a ring just like yours." Whispers spread among the customers. Some scoffed at the absurdity. How could a poor girl's mother own something identical to a billionaire's possession? But William remained silent, his mind racing. "Who is your mother?" His voice was measured, but those close enough to hear detected an unusual hesitation. The girl smiled faintly, as if proud to speak her mother's name. "Her name is Margaret." The name hit William like a jolt of electricity. His breath caught in his throat, and for the first time in years, his composure faltered. The salesman noticed the shift in his demeanor. "Sir, is something wrong?" But William didn't respond. His mind was already somewhere else, trapped in a past he had long buried. The girl tilted her head. "Do you know my mother?" William's fingers loosened around his ring as an old memory surfaced, one he thought he would never have to face again. And in that moment, the billionaire realized his world was about to change forever. William Harrington stood frozen, his usually sharp mind clouded by the storm of emotions surging through him. The name Margaret echoed in his head, pulling him back to a past he had spent decades trying to forget. The little girl looked up at him, her innocent face filled with curiosity. She had no idea that her words had shattered something inside him. The salesman, still holding the expensive ring William had been about to purchase, glanced between them, unsure of what was happening. The other customers in the store whispered among themselves, intrigued by the scene unfolding before them. William finally forced himself to speak, though his voice was quieter than before. "Margaret, what is your last name, child?" The girl hesitated for a moment as if she wasn't sure whether to answer, but then she straightened her shoulders and said proudly, "My full name is Lily Anderson. My mother is Margaret Anderson." At the sound of that name, William's heart clenched. He hadn't heard it in over 30 years. Margaret Anderson, the woman he had once loved, the woman he had abandoned. His hands trembled slightly as he looked down at Lily. Could it be? could this child, standing in front of him with those deep brown eyes, so much like Margaret's, be his daughter? Number impossible. He had left that life behind long ago. He had walked away from everything: poverty, struggle, and most painfully, Margaret herself. He forced himself to shake off the thoughts swirling in his mind. This was a coincidence. It had to be. There were thousands of people in this city, and Margaret Anderson was a common name. There was no reason to believe that this child was connected to the woman from his past. And yet, "Where is your mother now?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of urgency. Lily's expression darkened. She hesitated before answering. "She's sick. She hasn't been able to work for months, and we can barely afford food. That's why I came here today. I was hoping I could sell something to get some money for her medicine." She reached into the pocket of her thin, worn-out sweater and pulled out a small, delicate ring. The moment William laid eyes on it, his breath caught in his throat. It was the same ring. The same simple gold band with the tiny engraved initials inside, M and W, Margaret and William. The ring he had given her. The room seemed to spin. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing against the ring as though touching a ghost from his past. Memories came rushing back. The nights he and Margaret had spent talking about their dreams, the promises he had made, the love he had sworn would last forever. And then, the moment when he had walked away, choosing ambition over love, wealth over loyalty. He had convinced himself that leaving was the right choice, that he had done what was necessary to build his empire. But now, standing in front of this girl, her small hands gripping the last remnant of a love he had abandoned, he wasn't so sure anymore. Lily looked up at him with hopeful eyes. "Sir, would you like to buy it? It's real gold, I promise. You can have it for any price. I just need to help my mom." William felt a lump in his throat. This little girl had no idea who he was. She had no idea that the man standing in front of her was the very reason her mother had suffered. His mind screamed at him to walk away, to pretend this moment had never happened, to convince himself that this was just some poor girl with a sad story that had nothing to do with him. But his heart, the part of him he had ignored for so long, would not let him. Without realizing it, he whispered, "Take me to her." Lily's eyes widened. "What?" "Take me to your mother," William repeated, his voice firmer now. "I want to see her." Lily hesitated. She clutched the ring tightly, as if afraid he would take it without paying. "You don't have to come, sir. You can just buy the ring. Please, I really need the money." William's chest ached at her words. She was too young to carry this kind of burden, too young to be begging strangers just to keep her mother alive. "I will buy the ring," he said, reaching into his wallet. He pulled out a crisp bill, far more than what the ring was worth. Lily's eyes widened. "This is too much." "Take it," William insisted, "and take me to your mother." The little girl studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether she could trust him. Then finally, she gave a small nod. "Okay." She turned and walked toward the door, and William followed without hesitation. The world outside was cold and uninviting, but for the first time in years, he felt something stir deep inside him. A feeling he had long forgotten. Guilt, regret, and something even deeper, something he wasn't ready to name just yet. As he stepped out onto the street, following the small, shivering girl toward an unknown destination, he had no idea that his life was about to change forever. The cold wind cut through the bustling city streets as William followed Lily through narrow alleys and past towering buildings. The farther they walked, the more the scenery changed. The luxury storefronts disappeared, replaced by old, run-down buildings with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. The streets became narrower, darker. The people around them no longer wore expensive suits or carried designer bags. Instead, they were bundled up in layers of worn-out clothes, their faces hardened by struggle. William had not stepped foot in a neighborhood like this in decades. The air smelled of damp concrete and desperation, a scent he had long since forgotten. Lily walked ahead of him, her small hands gripping the money he had given her as if afraid it might vanish. Every few steps, she would glance back at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of suspicion and hope. "How much farther?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Just a few more blocks," she said. William looked down at his polished shoes, now dusted with dirt from the uneven pavement. He didn't belong here, not anymore, and yet something inside him refused to turn back. Finally, they stopped in front of a crumbling brick building. The paint on the door was peeling, and the steps leading up to it were cracked and uneven. Lily hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open and stepping inside. William followed, his breath catching at the sight before him. The hallway was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of mildew. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper, curling at the edges. A few people lingered in the shadows, their eyes dull, their faces tired. Lily led him up a narrow staircase, the old wood creaking beneath their feet. They reached the 3rd floor, where she stopped in front of a door with chipped paint and a rusted handle. She took a deep breath, then knocked softly. "Mom, it's me." For a long moment there was silence, then a weak voice called out from inside. "Lily?" Lily pushed the door open and stepped inside. William hesitated before following her in. The apartment was small, barely furnished. A thin mattress lay in the corner, covered with a threadbare blanket. A small table stood near the window, cluttered with empty medicine bottles and a half-eaten piece of bread. The air was cold, the only source of warmth a tiny space heater humming weakly in the corner. And then he saw her. Margaret. She was lying on the mattress, her once beautiful face pale and gaunt. Her long dark hair, now streaked with grey, was pulled into a loose braid. Her eyes, the same deep brown he had once fallen in love with, widened in shock as they met his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The years stretched between them like an unspoken weight, too heavy to lift. "William?" Her voice was barely a whisper, disbelieving. His chest tightened. He had imagined this moment before, but never like this. Never with her lying sick in a freezing apartment, struggling to stay alive. "Margaret?" His voice cracked. Lily looked between them, confused. "Wait, you know each other?" Margaret let out a soft, bitter laugh. "Yes, Lily, I know him." She turned her tired eyes back to William, "though I never thought I'd see him again." Lily's small face scrunched in confusion. "But how?" William swallowed hard. His past had finally caught up to him. There was no escaping it now. "Because," Margaret said, her voice calm but filled with something unspoken. "A long time ago, William Harrington was the man I loved." Lily gasped. "You mean, he's—" Margaret nodded. "Yes, Lily, he's your father." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The small, dimly lit apartment suddenly felt suffocating. William's breath caught in his throat. His daughter, the girl who had stood before him just hours ago, desperate to sell a ring for a few dollars to save her mother. His daughter. Lily took a step back, her face pale. "No, that's not possible. My dad, he left us before I was born. Mom said he never wanted us." William felt as if she had struck him. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Margaret sighed, closing her eyes for a brief moment before opening them again. "I told her that so she wouldn't grow up resenting you," she said softly. "I didn't want her to spend her life chasing a man who never looked back." William clenched his fists. "Margaret, She cut him off. "Why are you here, William?" His throat felt dry. He didn't have an answer. Lily looked at him, her eyes brimming with emotion. "You're really my dad," she whispered. He nodded slowly. Tears welled up in her eyes. Then why did you leave us? Silence. The question he had spent his entire life avoiding was now staring him in the face. Margaret turned her head toward the window, her voice distant. Because Lily, your father was too busy chasing his dreams, and he decided that we didn't fit into them. The words cut deeper than any blade. William took a shaky breath. It's not that simple. Margaret scoffed. Isn't it? You left, William. You walked away without looking back, and now, after all these years, you show up with your expensive suit and your perfect life. What do you want from us? He wanted to speak. He wanted to tell her that he had never forgotten her, that there had been nights when he had thought about coming back, about undoing the past. But how could he say that when he had done nothing to change it? Lily wiped at her eyes, her voice small. Did you ever think about us? About me? His heart shattered. Every day, he admitted, his voice raw. I thought about you both every single day. Margaret let out a humorless laugh. Thinking isn't the same as being there, William. He looked at Lily, at the daughter he had never known. I know, and I know I can't undo what I did. He swallowed hard. But I want to help now. I want to make things right. Margaret shook her head. And what does that mean? Throwing money at us? Thinking a few dollars will erase the years of suffering? William flinched. I don't expect forgiveness, Margaret, but let me help. Lily looked at her mother, her small hands gripping the fabric of her sweater. Mom, please, we need help. Margaret hesitated. Her pride had kept her strong all these years, but now, looking at her daughter, thin, hungry, desperate, she knew she couldn't afford to let it win. She let out a slow breath. Fine, she whispered. But don't think for a second that money will fix everything, William. He nodded, his chest tight. I don't. He turned to Lily. I want to get you both out of here. Somewhere safe, somewhere warm. Lily's eyes shimmered with hope. Margaret simply stared at him, and for the first time in decades, William Harrington realized that this moment, this chance, was worth more than all the wealth he had ever gained. Silence filled the small apartment, heavy and suffocating. William felt the weight of the past pressing down on him like an iron chain, tightening with every breath. Margaret lay on the thin mattress, her tired eyes watching him with cautious skepticism. Lily, standing between them, looked torn between hope and fear. William had spent his life making deals, negotiating contracts worth billions, and yet, standing here in this crumbling room, he realized this was the most important conversation of his life. Margaret cleared her throat, breaking the silence. You say you want to help, but why now, William? After all these years, why today? William swallowed hard. Because I didn't know, he admitted. I didn't know about Lily. If I had... Margaret scoffed. If you had known? What, you would have come running back? Don't lie to yourself, William. You walked away without a second thought. You chose money, power, success. His jaw tightened. I made mistakes. Margaret's lips curled into a bitter smile. Mistakes? That's what you call abandoning us? A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or missing a dinner. But leaving a woman who loved you, leaving your unborn child, that's not a mistake. That's a choice. Lily flinched at the harsh words, her small hands trembling at her sides. Mum, please, she whispered. Let him talk. Margaret looked at her daughter, her expression softening. She let out a sigh and turned back to William. Fine, talk. But don't expect me to believe a word you say. William took a deep breath. I was young. I thought success meant having more, being more. I wanted to give you a better life, but somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that meant I had to do it alone, and by the time I looked back, I thought it was too late. He looked at Lily, his voice thick with regret. I should have come back. I should have been there for you. Lily's lower lip trembled. I grew up thinking my dad didn't want me, she whispered. Do you know what that feels like? William's heart clenched. I can't change the past, he said, his voice raw. But I can change today. Let me take you both out of here. You don't have to live like this anymore. Margaret let out a bitter laugh. And what? We move into one of your penthouses, play happy family, and pretend the past never happened. Lily turned to her mother, desperation in her eyes. Mum, we can't keep living like this. We don't even have food for tomorrow. You need medicine. I sleep on the floor every night because our mattress is too small. I don't care about the past. I just want us to be okay. Tears welled up in Margaret's eyes. She looked away, ashamed. William reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a set of keys. I have an apartment. It's not a mansion, but it's safe. Warm. It's yours. He placed the keys on the small table. I won't force you, but at least let Lily have a chance at a better life. Margaret hesitated. The pride she had clung to for years wavered in the face of reality. She wanted to refuse him, to send him away, but when she looked at Lily, thin, exhausted, her eyes filled with a painful kind of hope, she couldn't. She let out a slow breath. Fine, she whispered, but not because of you, because of her. Lily's face lit up with relief. Really? Margaret nodded. But don't think this fixes anything, William. I'm not forgiving you. William nodded. I don't expect you to. That night, for the first time in years, Lily slept in a warm bed. The apartment William had given them was modest compared to his usual standards, but to Lily, it was a palace. Margaret sat by the window, staring at the city lights. She hadn't spoken much since they arrived. William watched her from the doorway. You okay? He asked. She sighed. I don't know. He sat down across from her. Margaret, I want to be part of her life. Margaret looked at him, her expression unreadable. And what happens when you get bored of playing father? William flinched. That won't happen. She shook her head. I don't trust you. Not yet. I'll earn it, he said firmly. Margaret studied him for a long moment. We'll see. For now, it was enough. The days that followed were filled with an uneasy quiet. Margaret was hesitant to accept William's help, but the undeniable relief of having a safe place to stay made it difficult to push him away completely. Lily, on the other hand, was beginning to blossom in their new environment. For the first time in her life, she had a warm bed, food on the table, and clothes that weren't worn down to thin fabric. Yet, despite the comfort, an invisible wall still stood between Margaret and William. William knew that trust wasn't something he could buy with an expensive apartment or a stocked fridge. It had to be earned. He began visiting them daily, though he kept his distance at first, bringing groceries, making sure Margaret had her medication, and talking to Lily about her school. She had always been a bright girl, but hardship had forced her to prioritize survival over education. Now, with stability, she was catching up fast. One evening, as Lily was excitedly showing William a book she had borrowed from the library, Margaret finally spoke up. You never asked what happened to me after you left, she said quietly. William put the book down. He had wanted to ask, but he wasn't sure she would ever be ready to tell him. Tell me, he said. Margaret took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. I was working as a waitress when I found out I was pregnant. I tried to track you down, but you had already moved on. Your career was taking off, and I figured you wouldn't want to hear from me. She let out a bitter chuckle. So, I told myself I didn't need you, that I could do it alone. William clenched his fists, guilt weighing heavily in his chest. I should have been there. She nodded. Yes, you should have. For a long moment, silence filled the space between them. Then Margaret continued. Things were okay at first. I worked long hours, saved up, and managed to rent a tiny apartment. But when Lily was 4, I got sick. Nothing serious at first, just exhaustion, stress, but it got worse. I lost my job, and then everything started falling apart. We ended up in shelters, sometimes sleeping on park benches when there was no room. Lily never complained, never cried about it. She just held my hand and told me we'd be okay. Lily looked down, embarrassed. I just wanted Mum to be happy. William felt his heart shatter. His daughter had spent years struggling while he had been living in luxury, oblivious to their suffering. I failed you both, he admitted. Margaret sighed. I don't need an apology, William. I needed you back then, but if you really want to make up for it, prove it. Not with money, not with gifts, but with time. Be here, be a father. William nodded. I will. And he meant it. Over the following weeks, he made sure to be present in their lives, not just as a provider, but as a father. He took Lily to school, helped her with homework, and spent evenings talking to Margaret, slowly rebuilding the trust he had broken. One day, while walking through the park, Lily tugged on his sleeve. Dad, can I ask you something? His heart warmed at the word, Dad. Anything, sweetheart. She hesitated. Do you regret leaving us? William knelt down so they were eye level. More than anything in the world, he said, but I promise I will never leave again. Lily smiled and hugged him tightly. I believe you. Margaret watched from a distance, a small smile tugging at her lips. It would take time, but maybe, just maybe, they could finally be a family. And for the first time in years, William felt like he had truly found something more valuable than all the money in the world, a second chance. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more inspiring stories on Stories of Hope.